So, I'm sure you all have family group texts. Can you hear me back there? Family group texts. And in my group text with my parents and my siblings, they put a bunch of videos, clips from Instagram and Reels and other things. So the other day, someone put a clip of Jamal Bryant in the chat. I don't know what he was talking about, but one of my siblings replied, he's a false prophet and a cheater, and he's got a bunch of kids, side babies, and so I can't listen to anything he says. And my reply was, don't miss the message because the messenger is flawed. Can we turn that down a little bit in my ear, the monitors or something, please? Don't miss the message because the messenger is flawed. One, he's human. Two, we all sin. We just happen to know what his sin is, right? And so the discussion went on, and my other siblings start talking about being judgmental and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, to me, it automatically clicked that this sibling is the embodiment of a super Christian, right? They're quick to see the flaws in other people, but they don't see their own flaws, which then they'll tie right into the message that I'll have for at least today. Is because I'm reading a book called Crucial Accountability. Whenever something is repeating in my life, then it's a pain point. And for me, I have to figure out that pain point. So in my business life, I keep running into the same problems with my team members, and so accountability, and the title of the book is called Crucial Accountability, Tools for Resolving Violated Expectation, Broken Commitment, and Bad Behavior. It's right up my alley, right? Because these are the things that I'm dealing with my team. And so as I was reading that book, I was like, okay, I realized that tied that with what happened in my group text, inside the church, in every aspect of life, there's this thing with accountability. And so the scripture we're going to use is Matthew 7:3-5. And it says, why do you look at the speck of dust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Now, Jesus is challenging us to reconsider how we approach the issue of accountability, particularly in relationships with others. He's using the sawdust, which is small and insignificant, but people become obsessed with other people's mess. It amazes me the amount of time that people spend caught up in other people's life, celebrity life, all of this stuff. It's like, who do I care who's sleeping with who? The Diddy trial, and I'm like, and like ultimately, it has no impact on my life. It doesn't change one thing about how I'm functioning today. And it just kills me to watch people get caught up in this stuff. And I'm like, but hey, it's your life, do what you want, right? Spend your time how you want. But while we're preoccupied with the specks in other people's lives, in their eye, we fail to recognize the plank in our own. Oftentimes, the plank in our eye is blinding us to some things that if we addressed it, our lives would be better. As I said, I'm looking at the plank in my eye when it comes to business and how I can grow and produce and be better, be more efficient, if I can just nail down what I figured out was the accountability issue, right? Because I've done different things with my team to, On Fridays, I inspect all of the units that that they've been working on through the week. We start putting materials on the job sooner. All of these things, but then I had to look at the root cause, because even though I made these adjustments to the symptom, it wasn't until I took a hard look and I had to get rid of, the terminology is important. I had to terminate the contract for a young man that is one of Miles's childhood friends who's been on my team for the last 2 years. I gave him an opportunity because I saw him out somewhere, it's about 2 years ago, saw him out just in discussion with him, realized he's not working, he has no real skill set. And so I told him, come see me, I put him on the team, and I will help him develop a skill set. And over the last 2 years, showing up late to work, missing days, and it's like, okay, the rest of the guys see this, and it impacts them because he's the closest to me. They know who he is in relation to me, and he's the worst one on the team. And although I tried other corrective measures, it didn't work, so I had to terminate his contract, right? But when I looked at it, again, the root cause was I wasn't holding him accountable early. I wasn't holding my team accountable, and that spiraled into other symptoms, right? So that's how I ended up with the book. But Matthew 7, this is a call to self-awareness. Before we hold someone else accountable, before we point out their mistakes, we must first look at ourselves and honestly evaluate our own faults. Too often we ignore our own flaws while focusing on the shortcomings of others. First question, because y'all know I like to discuss. What is the plank in your eye? Jesus talks about a plank in our own eye. What do you think the plank represents in your life today? What are some areas where you might be overlooking an own issue while pointing out others' flaws? Anybody want to share? Come on, people. Come on. Hey, you ain't got to go too deep with it. The question is, what is the plank in your eye? Jesus talks about a plank in our own eye. What do you think the plank represents in your life today? What is the issue that you overlook while you're looking at other people and trying to correct them? What are some areas where you might be overlooking issues while pointing out the flaws of other people? Tiffany.
I think the biggest thing for me, I look at other people, and because I wouldn't do it, I look at it and be like, why are they doing that? So I think that's my biggest thing. It's I'm looking through it through my lens of, I wouldn't do nothing like that, so why are they doing something like that kind of thing, so.
Okay, but so you're looking at other people and questioning why they did it the way they did it because you wouldn't do it that way. Okay, but that's still looking at someone else and finding fault in what they're doing. I'm saying, what is the issue? That's your fault? That's your plank? Okay. Not my place to judge. If you think that's your plank, then I'm good with that. Kiki, I got you, Pastor Pat. Go ahead, Kiki. Tiffany, pass her the mic, please.
So mine is, I think it's gluttony, because too much of, there's just a lot of things,
Okay.
So, like even though, that's just a thing. It's gluttony. It's too much.
Okay. Having too much of something in particular?
Yes.
Okay, got you.
And it's a lot of different things that I have, like I have collections of things, It's just too much. And then, as far as the internet goes, that's like gluttony,
Okay. Yeah, too much of anything, and I say collecting things, again, not my place to judge, is, yeah. If that's your point, then I got it. Okay, Pastor Pat?
Mine would be procrastination.
Procrastination? Okay. Well, So, what I've experienced, I'm a very task-oriented person. I'm driven by accomplishing things on my to-do list. And what I've realized is if I have something that carries over for 2 or 3 days, it's probably really not that important. And I just drop it altogether. Because if it was really important, then I would have prioritized it on my list, right? So it just may be those items may not be as important. They're probably something you want to do, but they're not really important in the grand scheme of things. Like if it gets done, it gets done. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? So hopefully that may help you a little bit. Anybody else? All right, next question. Have you ever pointed out someone else's flaw and later realized you had the same issue? Right? There's a rapper, I can't think of who it is in particular, but he has this line where he's essentially talking to his girlfriend in this song. And he says, you know, the way I treated you and you told your girlfriend who told her boyfriend, and he talked bad about me, but I'm sure if it was reversed, he'd realize he's trash too. Essentially, he's trashing me for the very things that he's doing. But he doesn't see that because he's looking at me and judging me, essentially is what it comes down to. And I think that's, again, we look at what other people are doing and saying, hey, you need to improve this. But we never take a look and say, well, I'm guilty of the same thing. You know, it amazes. Let's see, for those of us who haven't been saved all our lives, we've done some things prior to being saved. And now we have kids who are doing the same things. Now, out of our wisdom, we coach our kids and say, hey, you might want to not do that. Here's where it leads to. But how many times, what is the approach when we tell our kids? I found for me, it was better for me to say to Miles, I went to college, I had you in college, so don't do these things, right? Or you'll face the same consequence. I did this, you know, the first time I got a call about him drinking in college. Okay, dude, look, I know you're in college. I'm not agreeing with underage drinking by any stretch of the imagination. I'm also no dummy and think that you're not gonna drink. But be smart enough not to use your debit card at ABC Liquor, where your mom is looking at your debit card purchases and realizes you buying stuff at the liquor store. What else are you buying at the liquor store? I'm not, because again, I've done it. And for me, that approach connected better. And I think it has helped our relationship because now, even now, as he's married, I say to him, you know, hey, this is what I did. Here's why the result, and it was wrong. May want to try something different. But more often than not, just my observant, we try to tell our young adults more from a standpoint of you just shouldn't do it without sharing our life experience. And so I think we miss it because then there's a disconnect for our kids. We don't share our mistakes, we just tell them don't do it. And I don't think you have to share every mistake with your child or a young adult, but they know you human. But, you know, how are we trying to, you know, and then there's the hypocrisy of it all. Like your kids, they see you moving throughout the day. They see how you talk to people. They see how you handle situations. They heard you cussing out the customer service person on the phone. And then you want to talk to them about living right and respecting people and talking to people with Okay. All right. So, oh man. So let's keep it into the church, right? The church is filled with people quick to point fingers, right? My super Christians, but less willing to look inward. Accountability isn't just about correcting others. It's about first confronting ourselves in humility. Going back to my team, I was talking to my lead guy, and when I finally decided to terminate the contract of the young man, my lead guy said, "Carl, you brought him up too fast." Because I put him on the team. He was on the team on one of the crews for, 3 or 4 months. But then I started using him more as my personal assistant, go pick up supplies, tell the guys to do this, so on and so forth. And that disconnect, he wasn't in a place mentally to be able to manage guys that he could relate to. He had more in common with those guys than he did with me. And so there was always this battle of, well, I told you to tell them to do this, or you didn't check their work, and so my lead guy, we having a discussion, said, "Hey, Carl, you brought him up too fast." In other words, to a degree, it's your fault. And I had to look at that. To a degree, yes, it was my fault. I tried to correct it numerous times, but by that time, the bad habits had formed, and so ultimately, I had to terminate his contract. And see, notice how I keep saying terminate his contract, because he's not an employee, he's a contractor. See, if you've been audited, you realize the difference between an employee and a contractor. These are important words. Words matter. Okay. All right, so why do we sometimes focus more on other people's mistakes than our own? That's a question. Why do we sometimes focus more on other people's mistakes than our own? What do you think motivates us to pay attention to the mistakes of others instead of focusing on improving ourselves? Come on, help me out. Why do y'all think it's easier to look at the mistakes of others than yourself? Because for me, I know that if I improve personally, then everything around me will get better. My relationships will be better. My business will be better. My relationship with Christ will be better. So I try to focus more inward than outward. But why do we find it easier to just tell other people how messed up they are? Because we don't want to change. Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. So for those watching online, the response was, we don't want to change. Because in order to change, the process of change requires work on our part to identify what we need to change, to be accountable for our attitude about something or someone, and then to take the necessary steps to make that change so that we improve. And right, we're creatures of habit, so it's easier to just do what's comfortable than to do what's uncomfortable. And change is uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable because sometimes we end up in situations longer than we should be because it's comfortable. Okay, you had something?
Well, one of the main things is control. People don't want to give up control. I'm showing you that I got more control over myself, which is a lie. You don't seem to like the perspective that you should maintain some kind of diligence or accountability for where you acted. You're rude, you're this, that, and all the time I'm being rude. and being disrespectful, telling them, because was you raised by monkeys and all this kind of. Well, wait a minute, man, that's coming out your mouth. And the person just looked at you and say, "Oh, the thing I said was, I dropped something."
Yeah.
And it's that fear of losing control, and the fear of other people seeing you lose that control.
Yes. Being in control, some people don't like control. Some people would rather allow someone else to control things for them. And that's an interesting perspective in itself, right? Anybody else? Why do we sometimes focus more on other people's mistakes than our own?
With me, I believe that it's because we don't want to be honest with ourselves. I mean, they're just like looking into the mirror at yourself. What do you see? And it's you. I mean, and also, I feel that when we point fingers at other people or their issues or what they're doing, it's honestly something that's dealing with us to remind us of that we are doing the same thing, but we just don't want to acknowledge that. So if we feel better saying it about someone else than ourselves, honesty.
Yeah, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's a few things. One, I don't prefer to teach because oftentimes when I pray and I'm like, okay, Lord, the message is more for me than it is for y'all. I realize I've had an accountability issue all my life. I just don't agree with rules. Rules are boundaries most people follow the letter of the rule. I just think it's a guideline, it's a boundary, right? Parking spaces, they put the lines there. Yeah, it's just a guide, right? You never see my car parked in. Yeah, right. Yeah, coloring inside the lines when I was a kid, that's conformity, man. Y'all just trying to make me conform. Who cares about painting inside the lines, right? And I realized that. I was talking to somebody, this has been some years ago, but essentially it was like, what is one of the things that attracted you to your spouse? She didn't take no mess. She held me accountable. Who does that? Right? I mean, it's the one thing I don't like about her, but it's the thing I love about her. All right. What does accountability look like when we're not perfect ourselves? What does accountability look like when we're not perfect ourselves? So we know that we're all flawed. We all know that we have our own issues. And because I'm flawed, I have my own issues, then how can I hold someone else accountable when I haven't held myself accountable? What does that look like? Is it possible to offer support and correction without coming across as judgmental? Art?
Okay. I think this is just my thought process. I think a lot of times it kind of ties the two questions, the last one and this one kind of together in a way.
Sir, can you speak up a little bit, please?
I think for me, just kind of thinking about what you said in the last question and where we are right now with accountability. I think a lot of times for most of us, the issue is we want to make other people perfect while being imperfect ourselves, without allowing the grace that God has extended to us to be extended to other people. And I think the way we can be accountable, like you were saying a couple of seconds ago, the way we can be accountable and do so in a way where it's more productive than counterproductive is in that accountability, applying grace and realizing it's not my job to change the person, but it's my job to walk alongside them as God changes them and continue to encourage them and continue to point to them, hey man, you're starting to slide to the left again. Maybe we can work through this thing and just be there to encourage them to continue to battle, continue to fight. I think the one thing for a lot of us as believers is we don't have longevity when it comes to working with people as they learn accountability. Accountability is not something you just born with. You have to learn to be accountable. And in that process, we have to take the time and patience to walk with them as they become accountable. And I think a lot of times that's part of the problem. We don't have that kind of patience. I know, prime example, me and my brother, I run out of patience with that dude and trying to help him get to the place of accountability. That's just where I get to sometimes. But then God corrects me and says, well, what about, so then I have to go back and talk to him with the grace that God has extended to me to walk with him while he's still struggling to make it through whatever issue is that he's struggling in. That's the hard part. Do we want to do the hard work required to walk with somebody as they learn to become accountable?
Okay. I don't know if you all caught when Art first started talking, I folded my arms and then I put my arms down. It's because I realized body language matters, right? I have this thing with Art, and so because I call him a super Christian, sometimes when he speaks, I automatically get defensive. And I'm conscious of that because this is a defensive posture. You have, pay attention to people's body language. And so as soon as I did that, I realized, and that's why I put my arms behind me, because I wanted to be open to truly hear what he was saying. And so I had to make the adjustment myself. Right? And I joke with him about being a super Christian, but, it's just Art and I have this history sometimes. And so I have to be conscious when he says things to me that I receive it, because it's not always a bad thing. Right? So, okay. Yes. No.
For me personally, I would want someone to come to me and let me know if I'm doing something wrong. Nobody is without sin, and so we can't say, don't come to me because you're doing this or you're doing that. I think where the problem lies in, if you come to me and tell me and talk to me about, let's say, espionage or something like that, and you doing it yourself, then I think that's where the hypocrisy come in. So everybody has sin, but it's like, are you working on that? Are you trying to do better? So you might not know what's going on with me on the inside. I'm like, I know I got an issue or I have a problem, but I'm praying to God about that. I'm trying to fix that. I'm trying to work on that. And when I talk to someone like my family members and my children, I don't go to them because I hate them or I'm trying to point out what they're doing. I'm going to them because I love them and I don't want them to fall, and I know where that path leads to if they stay on that. So I think it depends on how you approach a person and how you talk to them. So like you said, I don't go to them saying like, I'm greater than thou and I'm without sin and I live this perfect life. I share my faults as well to let them know. I'm like, hey, we're all, have sinned. We all have fallen. But like, hey, let's, pick up. Let's, turn around from that. And so we should, as Christians, it don't have to be super, but as Christians, we should always go to one another gently and let them know, hey, I see you straying to the left a little bit. Come on, let's go. Let's walk the right way.
No, I agree. And how you talk to someone about what's going on matters, right? How it's said when it's said and the approach all matters. I would venture to say that more often than not, it probably comes across as judgmental and harsh. And also, I think we discount that my perception is my reality. So how I see things, however you meant it or however you said it, how I received it and what my perception of it is, matters. Because, going back to art, artists said some things to me that were perfectly valid. But just because sometimes I don't agree with art, then my perception is what he said is invalid. And it's not right, because what he said was valid. So then I have to, most people, again, we don't want to adjust our perception of either the messenger or the message, because we don't like the message because it hits to the heart of what we're dealing with.
Here we go.
Oh, man.
I ain't gonna try to go down the rabbit hole with it, though.
Oh, man. Okay.
But let me just say this.
Okay.
And I'm hearing what you said about the perception.
Yes.
But because this is where I'm at in my life now, I'm not getting ready to try to change nobody's perspective about me anymore, Miss Brenda. You heard what I said? I ain't doing it, right?
Uh-huh.
Because everybody has their perception.
Yep.
And it don't necessarily mean it's true.
I agree.
I'm just saying. Because I can't tell you how many times people have came up to me, well, coach, you this, coach, you that. You don't even know coach, first of all.
Yeah.
You don't even know me. You think you know me, you see me, but you don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we form different perspective about people, and it becomes their reality. And it's not my responsibility to change your reality. You feel how you want to feel. I don't care. So I said all that to say, I agree, but I disagree. And I'm gonna leave it right there.
Well, it's
Talk to your girl.
Wait.
No, hold on. Right, hold on. Now, I don't think the last time, and maybe it was the last time I talked, and I apologized to Coach, and she wasn't in here because I said for years that Coach and I could sometimes pass each other in the sanctuary in the hall and not speak to each other. And I had nothing against Coach. It was just my perception of her. And so, well, she didn't speak to me, so I didn't speak to her. And because of that last lesson, I realized I was wrong, and I apologized to you, Coach. You weren't in here to hear it. I was hoping, kind of thinking that you were outside and still heard it, but I apologize for that perception because you're right. My perception had nothing to do with any engagement you and I ever had where you wronged me or said something to me. I just had this perception about you, and so then I acted accordingly. But ever since then, I've made it a point to every time I see you, I speak to you, whether you recognize it or not. But yeah, I'm with Coach. It ain't my job to try and convince you to like me. And this is gonna sound unchristian-like. I really don't care. Here's the reality of it. I realize that I'm not gonna be part of everybody's tribe. And I'm okay with that. I realize that my personality is not the easiest to deal with sometimes. I'm okay with that. I'm going to walk how I want to walk. I'm going to do what I want to do. And as long as I don't offend, well, you may be offended by it. It's not my job to try to make you happy. So I'm going to go and do what I do. And as long as I don't step on your toe, keep it moving. But Art first, then Kiki.
Oh, okay. So 110% with Coach, because that's kind of my mindset. But I'm gonna add a little. I want to add a little balance from a personal experience that I had with one of my kids, because I think relationship has a lot to do with a lot of this too, as well, right? As a parent, we parent in a certain way. We address things in a certain way. We deal with issues with our kids in a certain way, right? I've had an instance with my oldest daughter where just nothing out of pocket or crazy or anything like that, but just the way she received, like we said, perception is reality. The way she received some of the correction that I gave her a certain perception of our relationship that wasn't accurate, but for her, it was very accurate. And it affected how we interacted for years, and I could never put my finger on why it was that way. Until one day she got to a place where we could have that conversation. Now, granted, she was an adult now, where we could have that conversation, and she told me what it was that had created that environment where she felt like I felt a type of way about her. That was never the case. It was simply me seeing something and trying to address it and correct it in the way that I felt most effective at that time. May not have been the best way. Nothing meant, detrimental to her or derogatory to her, but the way she received it, which I don't have any control over that, have no idea what's actually driving it, but that was something that was driving our and was really creating a wedge in our relationship. So I said all that to say this, absolutely. And I told her, I ain't changing my parenting style. I mean, this is what I've been doing. Now I have adjusted a little bit with the youngest, but I still have those basic boundaries that are still there, and I still address them in a much more productive way, but the boundaries still stay there, right? But I had to take a moment and allow her the space to validate how what I said made her feel. I can't control her feelings, and I ain't gonna try to. But I can control what I say and how I say it, how I present it. And I think that's where we kind of have to have a little bit of a balance in regards to that. And a lot of times, like with people that I meet, in general, man, I have people that tell me all the time, just because of the way that, depending on the situation that I'm in, I'm a no-nonsense type of supervisor. So when we start having craziness go on at work, I stop it right there. Hold it. What we're not gonna do is this. I don't care how you feel about it. We're not doing this. So I got a lot of folks at work that feel like I'm a really hard. When everybody that knows me, that work for me, I'm absolutely not like that. But that's the way they perceive me, and I don't really care. If that's how you see me, that's how you see me, and I keep it moving. It depends on relationship. It depends on how close in proximity those folks are to me and how much I really value their perception of me. And it does drive how I now respond in relationship to my daughter, because I don't want her to see me from that perspective. So I'm not necessarily changing things, but more mindful of just how I address her and that kind of stuff. That's why I want to kind of add a little balance to that.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'm going to point out something Art said. It's totally unrelated, but he talked about how he relates to his oldest and different from the youngest. And that's one thing that I've always found. The parents are always different because they old now. When they get to them younger kids, they really don't care. So them kids get far more latitude than, you know what I'm saying? Like my youngest sister, I tell her all the time. Like I call home, I'm like, where my parents at? She be like, they my parents too. Nah. The five of us got different parents than you got. You got old people trying to get into heaven for all the bad stuff they did to us. Like your lifestyle and our lifestyle is something totally different. Neither here nor there. Let's move forward, right? Kiki, what'd you have?
I just think it's interesting because, like, literally yesterday I was talking to somebody and I was like, well, I asked them, I was like, how do you not care about what other people think? Because, like, I don't know, sometimes I get that way and, like, I'll be, like, trying to people please people, And I just think it's interesting because I asked her that exact thing, like, because I don't know, I do care. I'm not gonna lie, I care what people think.
Yeah, what I would say to that, Kiki, is you have to pick the people whose opinion matters. So I have, of course, my group of people whose opinion matters to me. And so if they tell me I'm getting too far out of whack, then I'll make the adjustment. But if just random Joe Blow just say something to me, dude, miss me with that, right? And setting the boundaries, of course my wife is my accountability partner. She's gonna hold me accountable, right? I didn't want to tell this story, but I will because appropriate, and I'm really gonna hate to do this. Probably a month or two ago, we were having a breakfast here, and hospitality had set up the breakfast, and I got here early. CK is already laughing because she already know. And I wasn't even gonna be here for the breakfast, but I was stopping by to see Pastor for something, and I went in and I got some grits, right? And Lisa had a fit. And I'm like, dude, I always do this. Like, what's the big deal? But, okay. And I left, right? It's Lisa, super Christian, not really paying attention. Got it, right? She just railing against me because that's what she does. But then Keisha came to the church and then came back home and said, well, babe, Lisa said this, right? And remember, that event was open to the public and, food handling guidelines and this, and this. Okay, with that perspective, I get what you're saying, and it's valid. Not that it wasn't valid the first time, but now I've got the why she was really so upset about it this time as opposed to any other time. That's that accountability portion. And Lisa, to her credit, was wise enough to know that I'm just gonna block her. I really don't care. But she talked to my wife, who she knows can hold me accountable, right? And so, because she said it to Keisha, and then Keisha came home and said it to me, I had to tell Keisha, you're not the boss of me, right? But I still listened to what she said, because it was valid. And so now I make the adjustment when I go to, no, right? But ultimately, I know, and yes, I'll give you the mic in a second. Ultimately, I know Lisa was right? Ultimately, I know she was right, and that what I did from that perspective was wrong, and I did need to be corrected, held accountable for it, and how she went about holding me accountable was perfectly appropriate. Okay, what do you have to say, ma'am?
Well, I thank you for taking accountability, but how many in here, raise your hand, when hospitality has set up the station, how many people just walk in and help themselves to the food before the program has even started, have not washed your hands, did not ask the leader of hospitality if it's okay to go into those dishes? How many in here would do that or know that's appropriate to do?
What? We're not going to argue about appropriate.
No, we're not arguing, but I'm just saying it shouldn't have to take, so if we're talking about accountability, so yes, this is your church home, but we still have to do things in decency and in order. Mm-hmm. So the correct thing to do was just say, hey, Pastor Lisa, can I have some of those grits? So she would have probably fussed and gave you a hard time, but she would have fixed you a plate. But not just talking about you in general, but like it's kind of disrespectful, like, to walk into a place and then just help yourself without asking for permission.
I'm going to point out something. I'm going to point this out, and y'all are going to agree with me when I point it out. Did I start by saying I was wrong? Did I start by saying what the situation was? So then why does Super Christian feel the need to pounce on me after I already apologized and said I was wrong? You see what I'm saying? No, my grits. I lick my finger and put in my grits, not the bowl. Because Lisa was trying to take my grits. And so I put my finger in my grits. Let's make that clear. See what I'm saying? Let's make that clear. I didn't put it in the community bowl. I put it in my bowl. But don't try and change the subject, ma'am. I'd already said I was wrong, and then you felt the need to still tell me how wrong I am. That is such a super Christian thing to do. And it makes the point. Like, if I had, anyways, let's move forward, man. See, he about to get me off. Okay, let's jump forward so I can finish this lesson. Can you think of a time when someone lovingly pointed out a blind spot in your life and it ended up helping you to grow? And I just want to point out that did not help me to grow. But everybody, I agree. And ma'am, I also pointed out earlier one of my flaws is the lack of accountability. I do truly believe that all rules don't apply to me. That is who I am as a person. If everybody's going right, I'm going left. I'm just going to do opposite of what everybody else does. But, okay, let's go back to the question.
Just one question.
Yes.
Who established the rules and the laws of the land?
God. I follow his rules.
You left that part out.
Okay, you're right. I follow God's rules. Right. But man's laws, rules, they're just guidelines. Okay, let's go. Can you think of a time when someone lovingly pointed out a blind spot in your life and it ended up helping you grow? For me, I would have to say, of course, my wife. And yeah, my father, my parents, and then pastor, right? How they approach me, because they understand